All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining tonight. My name is Jennifer and I am the park interpreter in Spruce Woods Provincial Park. And today we're going to be talking about one of my absolute favorite things to enjoy, and that is Bannock. You see, I've actually taught a ton of Bannock programs in Spruce Woods Provincial Park, which resides on Treaty 1 territory, which is home to the Anishinaabe, the Dakota, and the Métis Nation, who have all been making Bannock for generations. And you see, Bannock, it's a simple and easy recipe. It's fun for the family to enjoy, and it has a really unique history in Canada that goes all the way back to the fur trade. So first of all, what is Bannock? What is it? Does everybody know what it is? To put it simply, it's unleavened bread, which means that it doesn't rise. It's basically doesn't use yeast. And it has four main ingredients. And those four ingredients are simply lard, I've got right here, flour, salt, and baking powder. So with those four ingredients, you can make your Bannock. Now, obviously, Bannock has a lot of different ingredients and a lot of different, takes on this recipe. But if you have those four ingredients, those four basic ones, you can make Bannock at home even tonight. So where did Bannock come from? Now, Bannock actually has a history that goes way back, all the way to Druids in Britain, where they actually used this type of bread, which was then called galette, and they used it in ancient ceremonies. So how did that get here? So that came from our wonderful Scottish voyageurs. So during the fur trade, our Scottish voyageurs from the Orkney Islands, which were a very hardy people, they actually made this galette. And when they made it back home in Scotland, it was made using pea meal, oatmeal, and barley. And later on, flour was introduced, and they would make it on like this hot stone in front of the fire. So they brought that recipe with them to what is now Canada during the fur trade. And it basically spread like wildfire. It was a really easy recipe, and it was really, really popular during the fur trade. Now, the reason this became so popular is because it has, it's really easy to make, and it has really high in carbohydrates. So that energy that they would need after paddling for 16 hours a day, they needed their energy. So it was high in energy, and it was yummy, and it also had a really long shelf life. So it was a really excellent type of bread to have when you were a voyageur. So the Scottish brought it here during the fur trade, and they shared it with the French voyageurs, and they also shared it with the local Indigenous peoples. And all of them put their own twists and kind of turns on how they like to make their Bannock. Now, disclaimer, this is not to say that Bannock did not exist in a different form here in North America before the voyageurs came. So our Indigenous peoples, they actually had a type of bread that was made out of various plant roots. So things like camas bulbs and fern roots were basically baked and dried and ground up and used as like a flour. And so they had their own version of an unleavened bread as well here prior to Europeans and the Scottish coming during the fur trade. So basically, Bannock is very, very popular, and I love it. So next thing though, is one thing that for our Indigenous peoples is that they also came to use Bannock as out of necessity as well. It kind of became a very strong part of their life, because after the fur trade, when we had our Indigenous peoples placed on reserves, we removed them from their traditional lands where they would gather and hunt. We were then put them on these reserves, and then we gave them a ration. The Canadian government gave them rations, and those rations were basically flour, lard, sugar, and eggs. And with those rations and the inability to hunt and gather their regular, food that they could, they had to use what they could to survive and not starve. And so the Bannock recipe, again, came to the forefront because it was something that was, again, high in energy, high in carbs, and it kept them from starving. So Bannock became an integral part of Indigenous way of life. So I think it's really important that we acknowledge this because part of truth and reconciliation is acknowledging these things that occur. And it's also important to recognize how Bannock continues to be used across Manitoba. So to this day, it's used as part of celebrations, part of feasts and ceremonies, and even just a part of our favorite mealtime or going on an outdoor adventure. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you my Bannock recipe that I like to share. I go for a very simple recipe because this is one that I like to make while I'm out in the bush. So this is a recipe pretty much just for one person. So when you make your bannock, it's really easy to just double up the recipe or triple it up, whatever you got to do. So I'm going to take you to my kitchen cam and we're going to check out how I like to make my bannock. So first thing that I need is a half a cup of flour. Now, when I'm in the bush, I don't measure this. I just usually take like 2 handfuls. And I know that my hands are gonna get dirty. So I like to advise you at home, if you're gonna make bannock at home, just use your hands because it's way better than using, anything else. So I've got half a cup roughly of flour. By the way, this is a very specific recipe that is, you have to be spot on, which is a total fib if you haven't figured that out. That's just joking. You need 4 pinches of baking powder. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And you need 2 pinches of salt. Pop that in there. I simply mix it up with my finger. I don't know if you can see that there. Mix, mix, mix. And then the fun part is the lard. So for my lard, I like to use like just regular lard, but you can use vegetable lard, doesn't really matter, either or. So you usually just do like a big tablespoon of lard and I chuck it in here. And what I do is I cover up my lard with the flour and then I pinch it. So I'm gonna pinch it until I've completely pinched it into my flour. And my end result that I wanna see is I basically want this mixture to look kind of like oatmeal. That's the best kind of thing I can kind of compare it to. So if it doesn't look kind of like oatmeal, then you probably need a little bit more lard. So it doesn't have enough lard at that point. You don't want to have too little lard. You don't want to have too much lard, because if you do too much lard, when you go to cook this either over the fire, I usually do it over the fire, then it's gonna fall off completely and then into your fire pit and you will lose your delicious bannock. And nobody wants to lose their delicious bannock. So as you can see, I've mixed it up and it kind of looks like this chunky, I don't know, I guess it's not exactly like oatmeal, but you know what I'm talking about. It's kind of got that vibe. Now here, lots of times I would add in cinnamon. My son loves the cinnamon. He really likes the flavor of it. But you can just do it plain. So today I'm just going to do it plain. Now I've got hot, I shouldn't say hot, I've got warm water. When I'm out in the bush, obviously, I just use whatever I can get my hands on, which is generally cold water. So I'm just gonna put a little bit in. I don't have an actual measurement for my water because I completely eyeball it here. So I add my water and I'm just gonna start mixing the dough together. One thing I did learn about bannock, the hundreds of thousands of times I've made it now, is that you don't want to over knead your dough. So you don't want to work it too much. And by the way, I am not a great baker or anything like this. So anybody can do this recipe at home. Very easy. And obviously you want to get all the last bits of bannocky goodness out of the bottom of your bowl. Do not let a single bit of bannock go to waste, because that is just sadness. You can't do that. All right. I have my bannock, get it off my fingers here. And you can see it's a nice dough. It's kind of, it's really moist. It's not dry, it's not clumpy. And this is actually the perfect dough right here for my bannock. So how I like to then make my bannock is I put this on a stick and I like to roast it over the fire. The other option is you can bake it or you can fry it. So I actually have a video I'm going to show you of me taking this delicious bannock and roasting it over a fire. So we will show you that right away. And I'll walk you through the steps as we do that of what I am doing. So first off, you need to have a good fire. So you can't have a measly fire. You have to have a nice, good fire, and you want to let it burn a little bit so that you get those embers. You really want to have a good hot glow because that's what you're going to be using basically to heat your bannock. So here what I've done is I've covered the end of my stick with the bannock, and then I'm wrapping the bannock around it. So I kind of make it long like a snake, and then I wrap it around the stick. And then I'm going to make sure that the end is covered, and then I'm kind of squishing it down onto the stick, because you want it to be pretty thin when you cook it on a stick. You don't want it to be so thin that you can see the wood. You want it just to be thin enough that, or not too thick, because if it's too thick, it's not going to cook all the way through. So you want to have it like that nice, perfect kind of even layer. And you're going to put it on the edge of the flames here. If you notice, my son's is on the top side of the picture there, and he's going straight for it, putting it right in the flames. And you'll notice his gets quite deliciously burnt, whereas I'm keeping mine a little off to the side, kind of down near the embers. I tried to keep it down there and basically off to the side of the heat. So you want to take your time. This process, by the way, can take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes for you to make this over a fire, depending on how much bannock you have on your stick, and how good you are and how particular you are at roasting. I feel like if you're one of those people that likes the perfect roasting marshmallow, then you'll be there a while, like perfectly gently turning your bannock to make it that perfect, nice brown coat on the outside. So then when you're ready, or you've kind of looked at it and it looks like it's been cooking a while, you can check it. And if you squeeze your bannock and you notice that, it's getting it's really squishy, it's not cooked in the middle yet. So it's not ready yet. So I've kind of poked ours a bit here, checked out how cooked it is. Obviously my son's here is pretty cooked, as you can tell. He really went for it on this one. But the funny thing is, actually at the base of his, it was completely raw. So we could just cook the end. Now, if you notice too, our sticks are not super skinny, so they're pretty decent sized sticks. Now, also, you'll know when your bannock is ready, because when you pull the bannock on the end of the stick, if it slides off smoothly, it's ready to go. If you notice this one, it's slightly sticking on me. That means that it's not fully cooked on the inside. So this one wasn't 100% done, but I was able to eke it off the end of it. Honestly, as long as the stick is not, I like the smooth wood, so the wood is not gonna be catching on your bread. That's pretty much all that really matters in terms of like what type of stick. So it's pretty much about the bark for me, but really any stick is okay. I don't really like the thin ones. I like the thicker sticks. And one thing to keep in mind too is I like to make my bannock kind of in this, when I do mine on the fire, I make it in this shape where I cap the end. You don't have to cap the end, but I like to do that, because when you go to put, your butter or your jam in your bannock, it basically like sits and it makes this like perfect little cup of the, jam and the butter at the bottom. You can roll it around and then you can just eat it. So I really like to do it like that. Also, if you get a really thick stick, so like a thicker one, like a decent sized stick, and you do the same thing, you can turn it into like a bannock dog. So basically I cook the bannock first and then I take the stick out, and then you can fit, like you cook your hot dog, you can slide the hot dog perfectly into your bannock bread. And then it's like the perfect bannock hot dog. So that is one version of doing it over the fire. Oh yeah, maple syrup is delicious. Honestly, you could put anything in it. It's like, you can't lose with bannock. I just love it. So couple options. So that's the first one. So learning how to do it over a fire. Now I actually have done an interview with a good family friend. Her name is Jay, and she's going to tell us about how she makes her bannock and a little bit about her bannock. So we're gonna play that next. Oh yeah, and hers, by the way, is with fry bread. She likes to do hers as a fry bread, which I haven't done yet. So if anybody has done a fry bread, like I'm fascinated to learn more. So if you have any fry bread tips, because I haven't made that one myself yet, go ahead and pop it in the chat if you have any, really good fry bread tips and tricks. I've heard that you need to make it like really thin, but I'm not experienced yet on the fry bread version. I do baking and I do it over the fire. Pretty much every time I do it, it's pretty much over the fire, but here we go.
Okay, my name is Jacinthe Lambert, and I'm Métis from Saint Laurent, and it's a Métis community, supposed to be the largest Métis community in Canada. Well, it's just you know, my mom used to make the bannock, like the big bannock, and she used to make that fried bread. And it's just something that stays with you. You know, you've had it all your life. You've made bannock all your life. And it's, you know, you don't have to go to the cookbook each time you want to make bannock because it's there. It's automatic. You make it. I make mostly the bannock that you bake in the oven, but I also make the fried bread. You know, not as often. It's more like a treat, but it's made basically the same, except that with the flour, the lard shortening, and baking powder, salt, and water. And with the fried bread, you don't add the lard. You just use the flour, baking powder, salt, and warm water, so that the baking powder just kind of rises like almost like bread.
Okay.
And you deep fry it. Well, that's the fried one, but the other one is with the no, you know, over the years, I guess I changed. Sometimes I make it with milk instead of water, and more like a baking powder biscuit, which is more, I think it's not as heavy, you know, and so it just depends how I feel, you know. I think, oh, maybe I'll make this kind today or that kind, you know, whatever. Yeah, so over the year it changes. You can add dried cranberries or raisins, or, you know, whatever you feel like having that day. I remember the ones that my mom made. Like they were the big ones, you know, the big ones, because we were a big family. So she made the big one, cooked it in the oven, and then just sliced it, and then fresh from the oven is how I liked it, just with butter. But most people like it with jams or jellies, and I don't. I just like it plain with butter, and the fried bread too, just fresh, you know, from the frying pan. I do. I have the fried bread today. So this is what it looks like. Let's see, where am I?
Oh, nice.
You just roll it, and then you make slits in it, so that, you know, and it cooks really fast. Like your oil has to be really, really hot, and you just put it in there, and yeah, so, and it's very good, especially when it's just fresh.
Could you break one open for us?
Sure. It's,
oh, nice. That looks delicious. It kind of almost looks like a donut.
it does look, except I guess you could probably add sugar, or you could do like a light dusting of icing sugar on it,
yeah,
too, when it's fresh from the frying pan.
Well, that looks wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your wonderful knowledge on bannock with us today. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I think, well, there's different ways, you know, the ones that's cons too that they make. So, but yeah, we just the regular bannock is the most popular one. Right. So thank you for having me.
Great, so that was Jay. So thank you, Jay, so much for sharing that. And we're now going to share a video from a good friend, Sheila, who's also going to share her recipe. She likes to bake her bannock, so she's going to share her baked bannock recipe. So while Sloan gets that up and going, I'm just going to show you that with the bannock that I made, I'm actually going to turn mine also into on the stove here, not on the stove, in the oven. That is where I'm going to put it. I'm not going to do it on the stove. So I basically just flattened it out, placed it on like put a little Pam on my tray here. I'm gonna poke it a couple of times, and then I'm just gonna pop it in the oven. And then I think, how long did I make this for? I think it was like 15, 20 minutes or so was how long I baked this last time. So Sloan, if you are able to share the other video while I pop this in the oven, you'll be ready to go.
Hi, my name is Sheila, and I've just made bannock. In my family, we call it galette. To make this, you need to preheat your oven at 350. While your oven is preheating, you will mix 3 cups of flour with 3 tablespoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of sugar, half a teaspoon of salt. You will mix that together. Once that's all mixed, you will add half a cup of margarine. The margarine I use is Olivina, or you can use a half a cup of lard, whichever you prefer. Once that's mixed, you will add 1 cup of milk. You will knead that for just a few moments. Then you will make 2 balls in your dough. You will take one out from the center to the edge. You will flatten it till you get a thickness of about 3/4 to an inch. Then you will take a fork and poke on both sides. Once you have both of them, you will put them on a cookie sheet and bake it for approximately 25 to 30 minutes. Halfway through the baking process, you will flip them so they can get golden on both sides. So once they're both golden, you will take them out and you can enjoy them with butter. This is what the end product will look like. In my family, we eat it with butter, nice and warm. My mother also likes eating it with jam, and my nephew loves eating it with sugar and cinnamon. So you can have it any way you like. I hope you enjoy this and try making your own bannock. Have a great day.
Right on. So that was Sheila. She is also Métis, and that is her family recipe for bannock. So as you can see, there's quite a different variety for different types of bannock, and it changes from all across Manitoba. So I'm sure if you even have a recipe, feel free to share it in the chat as well. I'm sure everybody would be interested to kind of hear a little bit about everyone's own unique twists on the recipe. So I have my bannock here in my little kitchen cam, and I simply like to enjoy mine with some butter, and I actually even have some choke cherry syrup here. So that's how I like to eat my delicious bannock, which is high in calories, don't forget, but it's the holidays, so calories don't count, right guys? So now I have time for any questions anybody has. I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have about bannock.
Okay, our first question here is, what other flours can be used besides white wheat flour?
Oh, golly, honestly, pretty much anything. It's literally, like, I've heard of people even making it from like cattails, the ends of cattails. You can make like cattail pollen ones. Anything that is a flour substitute, quite honestly, you can pretty much make bannock out of. So like we even talked about pea meal and oatmeal, and barley was made, you know, traditionally back in Scotland. So corn flour is also another one. So there's a lot of different options, tons.
Okay. There's a few questions here about the actual recipe. So maybe if you could run through.
Yes, one more time.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So this is this is probably the simplest possible recipe for bannock. So I do a half a cup of flour. So just a half a cup. And then with baking powder, I do 4 pinches. And then salt, I do 2 pinches of salt. And then I do a heaping tablespoon of lard. And then all you do is you simply put all your dry ingredients together. Make sure you mix it up. So you're mixing all of your dry ingredients. Then I add my heaping tablespoon of lard, and then I pinch it with my fingers. You need to do that with your fingers. You got to get right in there and pinch it up and kind of like smush it until it's all fully blended, and make sure that it kind of looks like that, kind of like oatmeal-ish. Looks like that, so it's well blended. If it's very powdery and, you know, it's very fine, then you need to add more lard. It's not enough lard. If it's like basically you created like a clump of lard, that's too much lard. So now you need to add more flour. So keep that in mind. And the best part is that you can practice this many times and make as much bannock as you want. So once you have that lard crumbled in, then you're going to take your water. I do find the warm water as well does work better than cold water, obviously. So just gently pour it in. So I do like a dollop of water and then I just cover it and mix it up. And then I just add a little bit more. You know, I don't want to put in too much because then it gets really sticky. But if that happens, you just add a little bit more flour in. Like this recipe it's not like we're baking a cake. So it's really nice and it's very generous. It's a very generous recipe to the novice, you know, bannock maker. So just take that flour, mix it up in if it's too sticky. And then you do want it to have like that really kind of, like it has to be malleable, you know, you don't want it to be stiff. If the bannock is stiff, it's not going to cook well. At least for me, when I do it on a stick, you kind of want it to have that really nice kind of springy texture to it, a little kind of like elasticy, so that it does wrap well around that stick and sticks well. And then, yeah, so we can bake it over the fire like I did by turning it into like a long kind of like snake, wrapping it around, covering the end, or, you know, putting it on that pan. So it's like 1/4 of an inch or 3/4 of an inch thick, you know, poke it with a fork and pop it in the oven, or make it like the fry bread. So there you go. That's the recipe. And I also wrote it in the chat as well, just the simple ingredients there for you.
So when you baked it in the oven,
Yes.
what temperature was the oven at and for how long?
Yes, good point. So I started at, I did get some tips also from some friends across Manitoba. And one of them said, set it at 400 to start and then turn it down to 350 and pop in your bannock. So I bake it at 350 and then I just keep an eye on it. So, you know, like 15 minutes, you know, something around there, 20 minutes. I just keep an eye on it because depending on how big your bannock is, it's going to take longer to cook. So I just watch it.
Your recipe here tonight, how many people does that serve? Me
If I'm not super hungry. So literally that is like one portion. So like the one that I have here, this is literally made with, this is the exact amount that comes out. Where's my camera? There it is. That's the exact amount that comes out of the recipe that I made. So it's a single portion. So I gave you my recipe that I make when I'm out in the bush. So when I want to do more, I just double this recipe up. Quite honestly, I've made so much bannock now that I just kind of throw however much flour I want in and kind of eyeball it and go, okay. And then I just add as much lard to make that perfect crumbly texture. And you can kind of eyeball it after you do it 100,000 times. So yeah.
Do you ever have to turn your bannock at the halfway mark?
Some people do, I don't. Like I've never, like when I do it in the oven, I'm assuming is what you're talking about. So this one here that I made here, it cooked perfectly fine and I never turned it. So I just put it in there as is. It never turned. And it's, you know, it's got that nice top here, a little bit, you know, more brown on the bottom, but I didn't have to turn it.
Okay. For cooking it on a stick over a fire, what kind of wood?
What kind of wood? I've done it with whatever wood I could scrounge out of the bush. I generally, the type of wood, I wouldn't want to have that like, you know, like the bark that's kind of peeling off or like the bark that's really, you know, flaky. But as long as you have like a good sturdy branch, green, you know, obviously you don't want to go cutting down anything in nature, but you know, if you can find a dead wood, that's fine too. But you know, like green sticks are pretty good because they don't burn, you know, in your fire. I like it to be a little bit thicker. So the thicker, that's one thing really important to remember. The thicker your stick is, the shorter amount of time it's going to take to cook your bannock because it's covering a more of a wider surface area. So if you go and you know, collect like a little teeny tiny stick, it's going to take you much longer. And when you put that bannock, you know, on your stick, you'll notice that like, okay, if it's a thicker stick, it'll go like this far down the bannock stick. But if you know, get a really skinny stick, your bannock all of a sudden goes like 2 feet, 3 feet down your stick, and you're trying to cook that evenly over a fire and it doesn't work very well. So go for like a good, you know, thick stick is what I would recommend. They have been telling me my bannock is halfway done.
Can you use butter in place of lard?
I believe so. I haven't done it with it. I've always used lard. I've always used vegetable lard or animal lard, but I've never, I believe you can use butter. I've heard of different recipes with it. I never have. Maybe somebody that has made bannock here tonight can comment on if they make theirs with butter or not.
If you're adding dried fruit, how much should you add?
Whatever you like, honestly, it's totally what you like. If you like a lot, chuck a lot in there. If you don't, like, it's a pretty, I have to admit, like, the Bannock recipe, when you cook it and you first eat it, you kind of want to eat it right away because it's kind of got that moisture in there. But if you leave it too long, it does come out quite, it does dry up in a sense. So it does hold things in it well. So you can easily put like different ingredients into it, like, nuts and fruits and whatever you want to put in there, and it will like hold it well within. So, experiment and throw whatever you want in there and try it out and see how much you like.
Ever made it on the barbecue?
Ooh, I haven't, but you totally could. You totally could. Yeah. But I never have. It's a good idea though.
Okay, this question. The Bannock always ends up like hockey pucks. What consistency should it be when mixed?
How long after you made it did it turn into a hockey puck? I would say, so if it's turning into a hockey puck, you probably need some more lard. That would be my guess. You probably need some more moisture. You need some more fat in that recipe if it's getting like a hockey puck. And you're probably cooking it a little bit too long. That would be my guess. So try adding a smidge more lard. Try cooking it a little bit less. See how that works.
I think that's it for now. If anybody has any more questions, feel free to type them in.
Yeah. And like I said, there's tons of different ways of making it. You can make it with milk, and you can make it like a lot of people use sugar. So you can do all sorts of different types of bannock for sure. So while we're waiting and seeing if there's any last minute questions, I'm just going to thank everybody so much for attending today. And just that bannock does have a really long history here in Manitoba, going as far back as the fur trade. And we can see how it has become an integral part of our culture. And it's something that you and your family can enjoy. So this recipe is really easy and it's really simple, and you guys can make it your own as we've discussed throughout this webinar. So why don't you guys start your own bannock tradition? Get your family out to a provincial park, walk around a nice, beautiful campfire, and maybe whip up some bannock on a stick. Make sure that you guys, when you are coming out to provincial parks, that you are following COVID-19 public health orders. So make sure that you're only visiting with members of your own household. If you do meet up with a friend, make sure that you are keeping to a group of less than 5 people, and make sure you're practicing the fundamentals of physical distancing and wearing a mask. So is there any more last minute questions there, Sloan?
How long can you store it?
Oh golly, it lasts a while. Honestly, don't know the exact expiry date, but you will be surprised. But it does turn into a hockey puck the longer you keep it. So I don't like to keep it too long for myself, but it like if I'm going on a camping trip, like it'll last the weekend easy, for sure. So yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us today, and be sure to sign up for any other webinars and online events that we are offering. The next one that we are doing is called Wolf Howling, and it's this Saturday at 10 a.m. And the details and the registration info is available on our Manitoba Parks Facebook page, online at manitobaparks.com. So take care and stay safe at home, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining.